Picture this. You are sitting in a room. Maybe it is a meeting, maybe it is a classroom, maybe it is a dinner table, or maybe it is somewhere much more important than any of those places. Someone asks a question, and you know the answer. Not perfectly, not with absolute certainty, but enough. Enough to contribute, enough to speak, enough to raise your hand. And yet, you say nothing. You wait. Someone else begins talking, and they say almost exactly what you were thinking. Maybe they say it worse, maybe they are less prepared than you, or maybe you even know they are wrong about part of it. But they said it, and you didn't. The room listens to them, people nod, and the conversation moves on. And you sit there with a strange feeling in your chest. Not jealousy, not exactly, but something quieter, something heavier. You think to yourself, that could have been me. And the worst part is, you are right. It could have been you. But somewhere between knowing what you wanted to say and actually saying it, something stopped you. A voice, a hesitation, a question. What if I'm wrong? What if this sounds stupid? What if they don't agree? What if I'm not ready? And in a matter of seconds, you have held an entire trial inside your own mind. You were the witness, the prosecutor, and the judge. And somehow, you were also the person found guilty. Guilty of not being ready. Guilty of not being good enough. Guilty of something nobody else in the room had even accused you of. So you stayed quiet, and life moved on. But here is the part nobody tells you. This doesn't happen once. It happens again and again and again. A job you do not apply for. A conversation you avoid. A business you never start. A person you never approach. A boundary you never set. An opportunity you watch someone else take. And every time you tell yourself a reasonable story. The timing isn't right. I need to prepare more. Maybe next year. I just need more confidence first. That last one is the most dangerous because it sounds responsible. It sounds intelligent. It sounds patient. But sometimes, waiting for confidence is just fear wearing a respectable suit. And if you wait for the day when fear disappears before you act, you may wait forever. Now picture someone else. A young man receives an offer, a promotion, the kind of opportunity he told himself he wanted. He has worked for it, stayed late, taken responsibility, and solved problems nobody asked him to solve. And now the opportunity is sitting directly in front of him. The answer should be simple. Yes. But instead he says, "Can I think about it?" Of course, there is nothing wrong with thinking. Sometimes thinking is wise. But he knows why he is asking for time. He is not examining the opportunity. He is searching for an escape route. He goes home and makes a list. The risks, the responsibilities, the things that could go wrong. And the more he thinks, the smaller he begins to feel. By midnight, he has almost convinced himself that saying no would be maturity, humility, and good judgment. But underneath all of that, there is a simpler truth. He is afraid that if he says yes, someone will eventually discover that he was never qualified to begin with. Maybe you know that feeling. The strange belief that confidence belongs to other people. Other people are ready. Other people know what they are doing. Other people were somehow given an instruction manual that you never received. And you are trying to catch up, trying to become ready, trying to become enough, trying to finally become the person who deserves to step into the room. But what if that person is never coming? What if the confident version of you is not waiting somewhere in the future? What if confidence is not something you discover? What if it is something you build, slowly, quietly, and painfully sometimes, one decision at a time? Because here is the truth. You probably do not lack potential. You probably do not lack intelligence, and you may not even lack courage. What you lack is proof. Proof that you can trust yourself. Proof that you can survive discomfort. Proof that you can make a mistake without turning that mistake into your identity. Proof that you can walk into uncertainty and remain standing. Proof that your word means something, not to other people, but to you. And that changes everything. Because confidence built on feelings is fragile, but confidence built on evidence is difficult to destroy. So stay with me. Because this is not going to be a speech about standing in front of a mirror and telling yourself that you are amazing. This is not about pretending you have no fear, and this is not about becoming louder. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are quiet. Some of the most insecure people you will ever meet are impossible to stop talking. No, this is about something much more valuable. We are going to talk about how to become a person you trust. Because once you trust yourself, confidence stops being something you chase. It becomes the natural result of the evidence you have collected. And by the end of this, I want you to see something clearly. The problem may not be that you have too little confidence. The problem may be that you have spent years gathering evidence against yourself without realizing that you were doing it. Somewhere along the way, confidence became a feeling. That was the mistake. We began treating confidence like motivation, something that arrives, something that disappears, something you either wake up with or don't. So before the presentation, you ask, do I feel confident? Before the difficult conversation, do I feel ready? Before taking a risk, do I believe in myself enough? And if the answer is no, you delay. But think about how dangerous that is. You have placed a feeling in charge of your future. A feeling. Something that can change because you slept badly, because someone criticized you, because your last attempt failed, or because you opened your phone and spent 15 minutes comparing your ordinary Tuesday to someone else's carefully edited life. And now, because of a temporary emotional state, you have decided not to act. This is where the Stoic approach becomes powerful. The Stoics understood something that modern people often forget. Your feelings are real, but they are not always reliable instructions. Fear can be useful, but fear is not automatically wisdom. Self-doubt can point towards something worth improving, but self-doubt can also become a prison. The question is not, do I feel afraid? The question is, what does the evidence say? That is a different way to live, and it begins with a distinction. Some things are within your control, and some things are not. You can prepare, but you cannot control whether everyone approves. You can speak honestly, but you cannot control how everyone interprets you. You can apply for the opportunity, but you cannot guarantee that you get it. You can build skill, but you cannot guarantee applause. And the moment you build your confidence on applause, you hand your emotional stability to an audience. Think about that. You walk into a room, 10 people approve of you and you feel good. One person doesn't. And suddenly you are questioning yourself. What happened? Nothing about you changed. Your knowledge did not disappear, your experience did not vanish, and your character did not collapse overnight. One opinion entered the room, and you allowed it to rewrite your entire file. That is the problem. Most people have never built an internal system for evaluating themselves, so every external voice becomes a judge. The boss, the parent, the partner, the stranger online, the person with more followers, the person with more money, the person who seems more confident. Everyone gets a vote, except you. And eventually, after years of listening to every voice around you, you become a stranger to your own judgment. You no longer ask, what do I believe? You ask, what will they think? And that is where confidence begins to disappear. Not because you became incapable, but because you stopped trusting the only person who has to live with every decision you make, yourself. When was the last time you broke a promise to yourself? Not to someone else, but to yourself. You said you would start, and you didn't. You said you would stop, and you didn't. You said you would have the conversation, and you avoided it. You said tomorrow, then tomorrow became next week, then next month, and then somehow you stopped bringing it up. Nobody else may know, and nobody else may care, but you know. And this is important, because every time you repeatedly make a promise to yourself and quietly break it, something happens. Your mind learns, not consciously, but gradually. It begins to question your word. Imagine trusting another person who repeatedly made promises and failed to keep them. At first, you would believe them. Then you would become cautious. Eventually, you would stop taking their promises seriously. You would say, "I'll believe it when I see it." Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. How many promises have you made to yourself that you no longer believe? That is not a reason to hate yourself. It is a reason to understand the problem. Because if you want confidence, you do not need to become a different person overnight. You need to start becoming believable again, to yourself. Nobody wakes up one morning and suddenly decides, "I don't trust myself anymore." It happens slowly, sometimes so slowly you don't notice. Maybe you were a child who asked questions without embarrassment. You raised your hand, you made things, you tried things, and you failed publicly and recovered quickly. Then something changed. Someone laughed. Someone criticized you. Maybe a teacher made you feel foolish. Maybe a parent constantly corrected you. Maybe you failed at something you deeply cared about. Maybe you trusted someone who betrayed you. Or maybe you tried your hardest, and it still wasn't enough. And your mind did what human minds often do. It created a rule. Don't do that again. Don't speak unless you are certain. Don't try unless success is guaranteed. Don't trust too quickly. Don't want too much. Don't show people what you care about. Don't risk looking foolish. And slowly, your life became smaller. Not because you consciously chose a smaller life, but because you were trying to avoid repeating old pain. This is one of the strange tragedies of self-doubt. At first, it feels like protection. Later, you realize it was confinement. The Stoics did not teach people to pretend pain never happened. They taught something more useful. Pain happens, failure happens, embarrassment happens, and loss happens. The question is what authority you give those events after they are over. Does one failure become evidence that you should never try again? Does one rejection become evidence that you are unlovable? Does one bad decision become evidence that you cannot trust your judgment? Or does it become information? A page in the file. Not the final page, just one page. This matters because your identity is often built from the stories you repeat about the past. And some of those stories are outdated. You are still living by conclusions you reached 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or maybe longer. But you are not the same person who reached those conclusions. You have survived things since then, learned things, and changed. Yet every time you approach something difficult, the old story returns. Remember what happened last time? Yes, remember. But remember accurately. Not emotionally, but accurately. What actually happened? What did you learn? What did you survive? And what happened after? Because the version of the story where you failed and everything ended may not actually be true. You failed and then you continued, which means the evidence says something very different from the story fear keeps telling you. You survived. Here is the first principle. Confidence is not a feeling. Confidence is a verdict. And verdicts require evidence. Imagine your mind as a courtroom. Every day, evidence enters. You say you value honesty. Then someone asks you a difficult question and you tell the truth. Evidence. You say you want to become stronger, then discomfort arrives and you do not immediately run. Evidence. You say you are capable of learning, then you fail, and instead of quitting, you study what happened. Evidence. The problem is that most people have a biased court. The prosecution is allowed to speak for hours while the defense gets 30 seconds. One mistake is presented repeatedly. One embarrassing moment from 10 years ago is still entered into evidence. One rejection becomes Exhibit A. But what about the times you survived? What about the difficult things you have already done? What about the moments you were afraid and acted anyway? What about the people you helped, the promises you kept, and the problems you solved? Those pieces of evidence rarely make it into the courtroom. Why? Because pain is loud. Fear is loud. Embarrassment is loud. Quiet acts of courage often make no noise at all. And that is why you need to keep a file. Not a fantasy, not a journal filled with empty praise, but evidence. Specific, real, and dated if necessary. The difficult phone call you made. The day you went back after failing. The moment you admitted you were wrong. The boundary you finally set. The task you completed when nobody was checking. The opportunity you accepted before you felt ready. This is how you begin changing the relationship with yourself. You stop asking, "Am I confident today?" and begin asking, "What evidence have I created today?" That question is far more useful, because you may not be able to control your mood, but you can influence your actions, and actions leave evidence. You missed a deadline. That is a fact. I'm unreliable. That is a story. Someone did not reply to your message. Fact. They don't respect me. Story. You made a mistake during a presentation. Fact. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. Story. Do you see how quickly this happens? The event occurs, and then almost instantly the mind writes a biography. One moment becomes an identity, one mistake becomes a personality, and one rejection becomes a prophecy. Your first job is to interrupt that process. Ask yourself, what actually happened? Then ask, what meaning did I add? These are not the same thing, and learning to separate them can change your entire emotional life. Because you cannot respond intelligently to a story if you think it is a fact. The next time something goes wrong, slow the process down. Do not immediately decide what it means about your future. Do not immediately turn it into evidence against yourself. Write it plainly. I was rejected. Fine. What does that prove? It proves you were rejected. That is all. Everything else requires additional evidence. And if your mind begins to say, "This always happens," ask for proof. Always? Really? Every time? Or are you taking one painful event and giving it the authority of a lifetime? Your mind may protest. Let it. You are not trying to silence fear. You are trying to stop fear from becoming the judge. Confidence is built through deposits, small ones. Most people underestimate small actions because they are addicted to dramatic transformation. They want the breakthrough, the speech, the moment, the day everything changes. But your life is mostly built in ordinary moments. The alarm rings. Do you get up? You said you would exercise. Do you follow through? You need to send the difficult message. Do you send it? You made a mistake. Do you hide it or address it? Nobody will know if you take the easy way out. What do you do? These moments look insignificant, but they are not. They are votes. Every action is a vote for the person you are becoming, and eventually, the votes accumulate. This is important. You do not become confident by declaring, "I am confident." You become confident when your own mind has seen you repeatedly act in ways that make confidence reasonable. Not guaranteed, but reasonable. That is enough. Start small. So small that you cannot negotiate your way out of it. One honest conversation, one promise kept, one uncomfortable action, one task completed without distraction, or one moment where fear says, "Avoid this," and you calmly say, "No." Not dramatically, not angrily, just no. Then you move. That is a deposit, and nobody can make it for you. Here is something fear does extremely well. It makes discomfort feel like danger. Your heart beats faster, your stomach tightens, your hands become cold, your mind begins producing scenarios, and suddenly giving your opinion in a meeting feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. But discomfort is not always danger. Sometimes discomfort is simply the sensation of growth. The Stoics understood this. They deliberately practiced living with less comfort from time to time, not because suffering was glamorous, and not because misery made someone superior, but because they wanted evidence. Evidence that comfort was not controlling them. Evidence that they could lose something and remain themselves. You can practice this today. Sit without reaching for your phone. Let boredom arrive and stay. Have the conversation you have rehearsed 100 times and avoided every time, and stay. Ask the question and stay. Walk into the room and stay. Feel your body react, and instead of treating the reaction as an emergency, observe it. Your body is uncomfortable. Fine. You are still here. Your heart is beating quickly. Fine. You are still here. You feel exposed. Fine. You are still here. And after enough repetitions, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop being terrified of the sensation itself. You learn, "I can feel this," and continue. That sentence is worth more than most motivational speeches, because courage is not the absence of discomfort. It is evidence that discomfort does not automatically control your behavior. There is a difference between "I failed" and "I am a failure." One describes an event, the other creates a prison. You tried something and it did not work. Fine. Now the question is, what happened? What did you misunderstand? What can you improve? What will you do differently? Failure becomes dangerous when you refuse to examine it, or when you examine it only to punish yourself. Neither approach helps. The Stoic approach is more disciplined. Look, learn, adjust, continue. The file remains open. Remember that. The file remains open. One bad chapter does not close the book. One terrible year does not explain your entire life. One decision does not determine every decision that comes after it. The file remains open. And if you remember nothing else from this narration, remember that. You are still gathering evidence. Today counts, tomorrow counts, and the next decision counts. The story is still being written. But there is another danger, and this one is more subtle. Sometimes you do not fail because you are incapable. You fail because you never allow yourself to begin. Think about how many versions of your life exist only in your imagination. The business, the conversation, the application, the apology, the book, the move, the relationship you wanted, the life you told yourself you would begin once you became more confident. How long have you been waiting? 6 months? 3 years? 10? There comes a point where waiting becomes more painful than failure. And that moment is a crossroads. Because you finally understand something. confidence was not the ticket required to enter the arena. Entering the arena was how you got the confidence. You have been standing outside the door, asking for proof that you can survive inside. But the only way to get that proof is to walk in. Yes, you might fail. Yes, you might embarrass yourself. Yes, people might disagree. Yes, you might discover that you are not as good as you hoped. And then, you improve. You recover. You gather evidence. The tragedy is not failing. The tragedy is reaching the end of your life with nothing but carefully protected potential. Potential is beautiful, but untested potential cannot protect you. It cannot speak for you, and it cannot become evidence. At some point, potential must become action, and action must become proof. Comparison is a thief. It does not need to destroy your accomplishments. It only needs to convince you that they do not count. You make progress, then you see someone further ahead, and suddenly, your progress disappears. You build something, someone else builds something bigger, and now yours feels worthless. You improve, someone improves faster, and now improvement is no longer enough. This is an impossible game because there will always be someone ahead of you in something. More experienced, more attractive, more successful, more visible, or more celebrated. If your evidence only counts when nobody else has more evidence, you will never feel secure. Their file is not your file. You do not know their starting point, their struggles, their advantages, their private failures, or their fears. You only know what they show you, and that is not the same thing as knowing their life. Return to your evidence. What have you built? What can you do now that you could not do before? What discomfort can you survive now? What conversations can you have now? What boundaries can you hold now? That is your measurement. Not whether you have won some imaginary race, but whether you are becoming more capable of carrying your own life. Do something good that nobody sees, and then do not tell anyone. Keep a promise that nobody will know you kept. Do excellent work when there is no applause. Be kind to someone who cannot help you. Tell the truth when lying would be easier. This builds something rare: internal authority. Because when you stop requiring witnesses for every good thing you do, you begin developing a relationship with yourself that does not depend on the room. Imagine the freedom of that. You can walk into a room and not need to impress everyone. You can speak without needing universal agreement. You can fail without needing everyone to understand. You can succeed without needing everyone to celebrate. That is strength. Quiet strength. The kind that does not need to announce itself. Once a week, stop. 10 minutes, no performance, no audience, no phone. Ask yourself, where did I act according to my values? Where did I let fear make the decision? What discomfort did I survive? What did I learn? What promise did I keep? What promise do I need to repair? Then write it down. Not beautifully, but honestly. Because if you never review the evidence, the loudest emotional story will continue controlling the courtroom. You need to see the pattern. A single good day can be forgotten, but a pattern cannot. Over time, you will begin noticing something. You are stronger than your worst day suggested, more capable than your fear predicted, and more resilient than you gave yourself credit for. That realization is not arrogance. It is evidence. This may be the real goal, not confidence, but self-trust. Because confidence can be situational. You can feel confident at work and insecure in relationships, confident speaking but afraid of failure, or confident in familiar places but uncertain in new ones. But self-trust is deeper. Self-trust says, I may not know exactly what will happen, but I trust myself to respond. That is powerful because you no longer require certainty before action. You do not need to know that everything will work. You only need evidence that you can face what happens next. And that evidence is built today. Not someday, but today. With one small action, one difficult truth, one uncomfortable conversation, or one promise kept. You are not trying to become fearless. You are trying to become reliable. Reliable to yourself. When you say, "I will handle this," you want your own mind to believe you. And the only way to make it believe you is to keep showing it. Let's return to the woman in the meeting. The next time she still feels nervous. That is important, because the goal was never to eliminate nerves. Her heart still beats faster, and her mind still offers the old question, what if you're wrong? But this time, something has changed. She has a file. Not a literal folder, perhaps, but evidence. She remembers the difficult conversations she survived, the work she completed, the things she learned, the mistakes she recovered from, the boundaries she held, and the promises she kept. And suddenly, fear is no longer the only voice in the room. She speaks. Maybe her voice shakes slightly, maybe nobody agrees, or maybe she is challenged. But she speaks. And regardless of what happens next, a new piece of evidence enters the file. I was afraid, and I acted anyway. The young man receives another opportunity. Again, uncertainty appears. Again, his mind begins listing every possible disaster. But this time, he recognizes the pattern. He asks himself, am I being careful, or am I searching for permission to remain where I am because staying here feels safer? He looks at the evidence. He remembers the difficult things he has already survived. And then, he says yes. Not because he is certain, because certainty was never available. He says yes because he trusts his ability to meet what comes next. That is confidence. Not the absence of fear, not the guarantee of success, and not the approval of everyone around you. It is the quiet understanding that whatever happens, you will face it, you will learn, you will adjust, and the file will remain open. So start there. Do not promise yourself that tomorrow you will become fearless. Do not promise that you will transform your entire life before sunrise. Make one promise, small enough to keep, important enough to matter. Then keep it. Tomorrow, make another. When you fail, do not close the file. When you feel afraid, do not automatically obey it. When someone doubts you, do not automatically make their opinion your verdict. Look at the evidence. Gather more. Keep building. Because one day, sooner than you think, you will walk into a room that once intimidated you and you will notice something strange. You are still not completely certain. You still do not know everything, and you still have doubts. But you are standing differently, speaking differently, and choosing differently. Not because someone finally gave you permission. Not because the world finally became safe, and not because fear finally disappeared, but because somewhere along the way, you became someone you could trust. And once that happens, you stop asking the world, "Do you think I am ready?" You stop waiting for applause to tell you that you matter. You stop confusing discomfort with danger. You stop treating every failure like a final verdict. You look at the evidence, and quietly, you understand. You were never waiting for confidence. You were building proof. And now, you have some. Tomorrow, you will have more. The file remains open. So does your future.